Welcome everyone to the Badger Dairy Insight series. Today we're going to be talking about animal care starts with the calf. I'm Melissa Seefeld. I'm the dairy and livestock educator here in Eau Claire County. I'd also like to introduce a few of our work group members that have been instrumental in helping bring this meeting together. We have Sarah Grochin out of Outagamie County, Jackie McCarville out of Greene County, Tina Coleman, who's regionally based dairy and livestock educator, whose home office, I believe, is still in Fond du Lac County. We have Ashley Olson in Vernon, Erica Bierstrom in Kewaunee County, Heather Schlesser in Marathon County, Matt Lippert in Clark and Wood County, and then we also have our specialist Jennifer Van Oss, who is UW-Madison-based assistant professor and extension specialist in animal welfare, who's going to be speaking with us a little bit more this afternoon. We do have a demographic pull-up. Please fill that out for us. We'd sure appreciate that. A reminder, we do have this series set for a bi-weekly time frame. So we'll be meeting Tuesdays from 1 to 2:30, but every other week. And you can find information on our upcoming series at the website, the Farm Ready Research website. And if I can have one of my co-hosts drop that link in the chat, that would be super helpful. And as we go through the presentations today, do remember that we can drop our questions in the chat, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentations. We have Dr. Sylvia Kehoe, who has been working at the University of Wisconsin River Falls in dairy science for the last 15 years. Before that, she had finished her undergraduate at UC Davis, her master's at Iowa State University, and her PhD at Pennsylvania State University. Her degrees are all in animal science with the emphasis in animal nutrition. Her focus has always been dairy calves and how to help them stay healthy and become productive cows. Dr. Kehoe teaches undergraduate classes in dairy and animal nutrition, a global perspective class on animal care and use, and an animal calf management class. Her current research has focused on designing a caustic paste applicator to make the disbudding process easier and safer for both calves and employees. And with that, Dr. Kehoe.
I just wanted to share a quick story. And those of you that have kids, you know that when you have kids, you kind of stop doing any kind of hobbies that you used to have because you're busy. And my kids are old enough now where they wanted to go rock climbing. And I was like, oh, yeah, great. You know, when I was in my school careers, my undergrad and master's and PhD, I used to be a rock climber. And when I say that, it's nothing fancy. It's just on the inside walls because I got this fear of heights. And so we went to rock climb, and I had been belaying people, which means that you're the one holding the rope at the bottom, you know, so that people don't fall down. And so the young lady at UW River Falls said, well, do you want to get certified to belay again? And I was like, yeah, okay. You know, I can belay my kids. And she started teaching me this method. And it was, you know, I had been belaying maybe 10, 15 years ago, and the method was reversed. It was actually opposite from what I learned. And, you know, and when we think about life, that's kind of how it goes, where our endpoint is still the same. I'm still trying not to let somebody fall because I'm holding them, but the method was reversed, and the way they were doing it was actually better for your wrist, because instead of holding like this, which is how I learned, the wrist was flipped, which is much healthier for your wrist. And I just, you know, I'm so happy to see so many people registered and attending this webinar, because we still have the same goals from so many years ago, but we can do them differently, right? We still want healthy calves. We still want disbudding to be easier, but we want it to be, but we have different ways of doing it. And so I was just kind of like, wow, I'm not that old, but this method has completely changed. So now when I say make disbudding easier, you know, what's easier, right? And so I was going through and thinking of all the different perspectives that we can have on a farm. And so we have the owner and the manager or the manager of the farm. And, you know, basically they want their calves to have no horns. They want it to be no hassle, where they're not getting in having all these questions being asked of them or having to fix problems. And then they want it to be no cost or at least low cost. And when we think about the calf perspective, obviously we, just like any person or animal, they want it to be painless, I'm sure, right? They want it to work because that means there's less handling of them. We don't have to redo it. And they want it to be a short time. Calves don't like to be manhandled. They don't like to be restrained, especially. And especially when we think about the head, and in the equine world, they use this term head shy. And that's exactly what calves are. They are head shy. You put a halter on them, what's the first thing they do? They don't like it, right? They fall over. So, and then, ideally there's some milk involved, right? Because just like all of us, if there's a donut involved, I'm going to go to that meeting, right? And then with the worker perspective, right? So it's not, a lot of the time now, it's not the owner or the manager that's doing the calf work, it's the worker. And so from the worker perspective, they want it to be easy. They want it to take very little of their time. And then I've also found that workers really want to be proud of their area, right? And maybe it's because they have some kind of incentive program or whatnot, but they want to do a good job. And so they want to be consistent. And, if we look at all of these things, so between all these perspectives, we see some similarities, right? So no horns, it's working, it's consistent, or no hassle, very short time, it's easy, there's short time involved. And, and one of the things, and so, even though there's different perspectives, we do all kind of want the same thing. And then just overall, we need it to be safe for the calf and worker. And we always talk about what I hear is with disbudding and caustic paste, especially caustic paste, but hot iron as well, is we want it to be safe for the calf, but we also have to remember that we want it to be safe for the worker. And so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about is with this photo here. This is a calf. So I'm in charge of the disbudding on the farm, on our farm at UW River Falls. And it keeps me in practice. And so a couple of days ago, I disbudded this little Jersey calf. And you can see a little bit, there's a really nice tight ring on her right side. And then on her left, you can just see this monstrous eaten away area, wound basically from the caustic paste. And you might be able to tell, but there's actually a little bit of hornbud right here still. So, being the professional that I am, there's still stuff that happens like this, right? And so this calf then is going to have to be disbudded again, because what happened was she just rubbed that side off. And so we're also, so in this talk, I'm going to talk about, how do we do these things properly? And how do we, potentially maybe not, we try and prevent these things, but hopefully we can address them when they do happen. And then in this middle picture here, we're going to talk about some pain relief and how important that is. And then on the right-hand side, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I want you to keep this in mind that paste is very dangerous. It's bad for the calf, but it's bad for the workers as well. And I don't have a hot iron on here, but I've been burned by a hot iron before, and so we need to keep our workers safe, and we need to give them the tools that can help them stay safe. So we're going to do, this first poll question here. What's the main method of disbudding that you use? And, there's other ways, but the most common, hot iron and caustic paste. And then, some kind of a little bit more intense gouging, sawing, or other methods, or just other. I'm just going to give this a second because I'm curious. It looks like hot iron is the most common from our respondents here, 67%, caustic paste 39%, and gouging is 6%. So the importance of disbudding, and and I put this in, I'm not sure this is the correct term, but why it's not done correctly. But when I go out to farms, and I go out to a lot of farms with my students for Dairy Challenge, for classes, and I visit with a lot of producers and all over the country. So we do, mainly for Dairy Challenge, we go out, which is a competition for our undergraduates. We go out to all parts of the country, and this is probably one of the most common things that I see is, disbudding is done either improperly. There's, large wound sizes, there's infections, things like that. And so, Dr. Van Oss talked about the survey that they did, and this is where I took some of this data, but I obviously focused on the disbudding part. And so what they found was that 61% of producers use paste and 32% use hot iron, which is funny because in this, our respondents here, it's actually opposite. But either way, these are the two most common methods. And when does this happen? So with caustic paste, a little bit more than half are using it on the first day, and then the next week is 38%. And then for hot iron, it's the second month of life where you have 41%, and then a third do it in that first month of life. And then when we talk about, what else we want to focus on today is the pain relief for this. And so of those that use caustic paste, 17% use lidocaine. Of those that hot iron, 30% of them use lidocaine. And this is, most of the time producers are doing this with their veterinarian on record. And so there are different things that they can use. The lidocaine block is kind of the gold standard. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about how to use that. With the NSAID, so those are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Usually this is Meloxicam that they're using. And I tell my students Meloxicam is kind of like ibuprofen, right? So if you treat it if you're going to try and treat something like a broken leg, ibuprofen is going to take the edge off. So it's not going to be a great pain relief, but it's going to take the edge off, and it's at least something. And so it looks like 33 and 30% are going to use an NSAID. And that typically is a lot of the time it's along with some other kind of pain relief, like a lidocaine block or Banamine or flunixin. And then here's kind of the issues of where we find that it's not done, hasn't been done correctly. Sometimes calves are skipped, whether that's by accident or on purpose. The 46% of the respondents said that they use a combination of methods. And so maybe that is where, at some point calves get skipped and you use paste, but then you have to hot iron, for example, or you use a hot iron, but then you have to gouge. And that's, it happens. I'm in that position right now where there was a calf whose her horn buds were just so small, and they didn't grow in until probably 2 months of age. Like she was like 7 weeks old. And by the time I remembered to look at her again, she's, I think she's 9 or 10 weeks old now. And so we're going to have to gouge her, which is unfortunate, for us, because it's just so much more work and stress for everybody, but it happens, right? And so these other issues, though, like I showed you with that little Jersey calf, of those that use caustic paste, they've, said 74% of them said that they've had to repaste, or hot iron, 30% had to repeat hot iron. Again, not an ideal situation. It happens. So let's try and prevent that a little bit. And with this calf here, you can see like also how sometimes something like pasting or hot ironing isn't very consistent, and it's done probably a little bit over the top. And this is not my pasting, but it was one of our farm workers, and I don't know, she just went to town with that paste. And so this is where we have to make sure that we're training and retraining our people. Okay, so let's talk about the actual methods of disbudding. And so this is where, if everybody's on the same page and we know all the materials we need and we know how to do it, hopefully it works the first time, right? And so with caustic paste, we're looking for that really early stage of calves. And, and like I mentioned before, some calves, horn growth is very interesting. We really don't know much about it. We haven't studied it. Horn growth doesn't seem to be consistent with calves. It seems like it is It doesn't necessarily mean a bigger calf is going to have a bigger horn. I've seen big calves have really small horn buds, and I've seen little calves have larger horn buds than their partners. And so horn growth can be tough because sometimes you can't even feel those horn buds. And with caustic paste, it's really good. You have to be able to feel the horn buds to know where to put that paste. And so we say 1 to 3 days of age is ideal. Less than 7 days of age, that's actually what's listed on most of the products you're going to buy. And again, it's not so much that you can't do the calves after 7 days of age, it's that their horn buds just get so big that something like a paste isn't going to take that off. And I've done calves that were almost 3 weeks old because their horn buds were so small, I could still paste them. They were just tiny. And so it really depends on the horn growth of that animal. So with the SOPs, are we going to clip the horn bud? Are we going to take that hair off? In California, they don't shave the horn bud. They use that fur on the calf's head, that hair, to, they rub it in. They use it to hold the paste in. It works really well out there. Out here where we have Wisconsin winters and it is, minus 20, I'm not sure paste could get through all the hair that our calves have. So whether we clip that horn bud or not, that depends on where you live, I think. So UW Extension, as well as other places, recommend a lidocaine block. The lidocaine block, I'm going to talk about that. A lot of farmers feel that paste doesn't warrant a lidocaine block. And so we're going to talk about that in a minute here. We're going to apply a quarter size amount of paste. Again, we don't actually know how much paste is the right amount, but that's what's listed on the products. And then we're going to give Meloxicam, and we'll talk about this as well. And so here's kind of the, my supplies here. I've got my gloves, I've got a syringe and the lidocaine for my lidocaine block. I've got my actual paste, and whether, this is what I use right now, whether you use the Dr. Naylor's, there's a Dr. Larson's, there's a Remove, I think, through Genex, if they still sell that. Whatever you use, it's pretty much the same kind of protocol. And then the Meloxicam. And then this is one thing, again, with keeping workers safe. This is my bottle of vinegar. And vinegar, we need to have that on hand at all times if you're using paste. It neutralizes the caustic paste. Paste does not wash off with water. It's a burn that happens once it starts. It just has to, the pH has to be it's alkaline, so it has to be neutralized. And one of the things that I forgot about in our winters, so I keep my paste and I keep my lidocaine in our warm room because they will freeze. And I forgot that vinegar freezes as well. And so when, I went to move the bottle, I didn't need it, thankfully, but I realized that it was frozen. So frozen vinegar doesn't help, but it is something that if you are using paste, you should have on hand at all times. The other thing too is I've got this calf here that we have these, I mentioned, or Lisa mentioned this, that I'm working on an applicator, and we've got the idea, we've got the concept down. We don't have an adhesive yet, so we're not very far with it, only because we only have half of it really. But ideally we would have something like this where it's easy to, the paste is in there, you peel off the caustic side of it, you put it on the calf's head, and you're done. That would be ideal. And of course, that's with the pain relief and all that's given. But ideally, at some point, we'll find something like that. Some places recommend putting a piece of duct tape over the horn bud. And, the more active the calf is, the more likely she is to rub that off of her head. So it can be important to cover that paste so she doesn't get it all over herself. So with the hot iron, again, this is the second method we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about the other methods, but here's my hot iron with my propane gas, whatever kind of hot iron you use. I like this one. I can't even tell you the brand name of it. I've had it for a while. I've got my starter that starts the flame. I've got this little hanger. I put this in here because the easier you can make your method and process, the easier it is to do, right? And so my little propane tank actually has this little hanger that just makes things just that much easier. I've got my piece of wood to check how hot my hot iron is, and then my halter. And if you noticed in the caustic paste, I don't have a halter. I don't use a halter. It's almost more trouble than it's worth for me. And so with the hot iron, though, I do use a halter. And then of course I've got my lidocaine block and my Meloxicam here. And so and whether you clip your horn bud, that's, again, there's a question mark because you don't necessarily have to clip your horn bud. It's just that then there's quite the aroma of burning hair if you don't. So again, having something that really just kind of walks you through it. And this is what our assistant manager at our farm put together. She's updating our protocols, which everybody I know loves to do. And so she just wrote this up. And so she's got all her supplies listed here. She has how to do the calf, how to do the lidocaine block and everything. What I would add to any kind of SOP is when you're going to do it. So she doesn't have that in here because she just didn't really think about it. And so how many days after birth you're going to do it. And then when are you going to do it with, in terms of milk feeding, for example. And then also adding what you're going to do if a calf is skipped. And that's probably one of the more important things is we need everybody on the same page as to, are you going to paste that calf again? Are you going to wait until you have to hot iron? Or if you have a hot iron, when are you going to check those buds? Because once that calf moves out of the pen into some kind of weaned, bigger pen, it's going to be harder to restrain. And so that's going to be tougher at that point to work with. So let's talk about pain. It is a painful method. So the farm program, their latest version does say pain mitigation for disbudding is provided. So that is an expectation. They go along with the AABP, which is the bovine practitioners. This is from the bovine practitioners website, which is literally what the farm program has in here. And so, they recommend that pain management be considered. They want you to work with your veterinarian. And so that can be something that, really needs to be thought about carefully when you think about what would a consumer think if they saw you doing what you're doing. And it's not that we have to live by that, but it is something that we need to be thinking about. And, so here I've got these videos, and this is from Dr. Winder in Canada. This is a calf that's being hot iron disbudded without a lidocaine block. And you can see just how, obviously the calf is in pain. We know it's painful, but also how dangerous it is for the worker. I mean, that's a hot iron, that you graze yourself with that and it's going to burn your skin. And then versus, obviously with a lidocaine block, and sometimes you'll see the calves moving a little bit more than this, but it's definitely a lot easier, a lot safer for, again, the calf, but also and especially the worker. And then if we look at same thing with paste, right? We know that paste is painful. And this is from Dr. Winder as well. I have a bunch of videos of these, but I couldn't access my hard drive. So I borrowed hers. And this is after 30 minutes. The calf has gotten Meloxicam, which again, like I mentioned, is an ibuprofen type. And so it's going to take the edge off, but it's definitely not going to provide major pain relief. And this calf had a saline, it's a research trial, right? So they put in saline instead of lidocaine. And so the calf, it's getting up, it's laying down, it's, basically, now these calves are 10 days old. And so that does make a difference. The older the calf is, the more it's going to react and the more it's able to rub that paste off on everything, right? And so you can see how uncomfortable that is for the calf. And here, this calf has had the lidocaine and with Meloxicam, and basically the calf is just staring at the person doing the video, right? But you don't see the head shaking, you don't see the ear flicking, you don't see the licking of the mouth. So basically, what this means though is that the paste is going to be a lot safer for the calf. It's not going to rub it off on itself or on anything else. And it's just a safer way of doing things. So,
Okay, right?
so, so let me take that sound down. So this is me giving a lidocaine block. And this is a calf that's about 6 weeks old. It looks like I'm going to poke this calf in the eye with the needle, but when you're used to doing this, when you're in control, you know you're not. But what I'm doing, what I found is that with the lidocaine block, it's harder to teach. It sounds worse than it is. What you do is you just go by the eye. There's a little divot there. And as long as you poke the needle in anywhere where there's that divot and you point up towards the horn bud, you're going to be okay. Sometimes your needle gets a little stuck. You kind of readjust and you put in your lidocaine block. Now this, this looks bad, right? Because the calf is big, she's big. It's easier when they're smaller, and it's actually not that hard. You just have to do it your first time. Some people will halter calves. I usually, because when I'm doing them for paste, they're smaller, I just straddle them. But either way, it looks worse than it is. And your veterinarian can easily teach you or your workers how to do it. So again, it's kind of right by the eye that you're doing it. And really in the literature, they'll tell you, you should be at the midpoint between the horn bud and that corner of the eye. There is a bony ridge there, right? That's kind of this ridge that everybody always talks about. And your needle sometimes has a hard time going under that ridge. And from what we found with our work here with my students is that if you go into that soft little spot by the corner of the eye and you point up, that lidocaine is actually going to get to where it needs to be. And so this calf on the right side, I apologize for anyone that's queasy, but this is what we did with some students is we took a food grade dye and we injected it in a couple different places in a couple of deceased calves. They've been euthanized from a local farm. And we opened that area up and we wanted to track where that food grade dye went. And we actually were able to find the corneal nerve and saw that the lidocaine, when we injected it in a couple different places, actually did get to anesthetizing that corneal nerve. And the next step in this is to get some calves that are about to be euthanized, give them this injection of food grade dye, wait 10 to 15 minutes, and then euthanize them and open them up to see how far, because obviously in a dead calf that nothing's going to travel anywhere. And so look to see how far that dye gets to different places. But from personal experience, from what I found is as long as you give that lidocaine some time, so 5 minutes is too short, 10, 15 minutes. And they say you go around and you check with a little needle to see if that calf is feeling anything. But really, with my hot iron calves, I give them 20 minutes. I walk away, I do other things. I lidocaine other calves or whatever it is, 20 minutes and you're good to go. You're golden. So whether or not you're checking that calf for pain, it works. Now for Meloxicam, so this was, This was a study down here, pharmacokinetics of IV and oral meloxicam. And the nice thing about this one is what they showed is they looked at how much meloxicam do the calves get. So again, this is an oral medication, right? Similar to ibuprofen. And the idea is, how much pain relief can it provide, or at least how much of it does it get into the system? And so the IV we're going to ignore because people are not going to IV their calves with meloxicam. But these dark circles, those are 1 milligram per kilogram orally. And that's typically what veterinarians will recommend. And so you can see that it does take a little bit of time to get into the calf system. This is in hours. And so they say that the meloxicam usually peaks around 11 hours. And so if you think about that, if you are going to give meloxicam to your calves to reduce some sort of pain, you don't want to do it at the time that you are causing that pain, right? Because just like if you're taking a medication, it's going to take a little bit to get into your system. And so they say that ideally you would potentially the milk feeding before you do something, you're going to, you think ahead, you plan, right? Because we're going to plan these things, and you're going to give that meloxicam about 11 hours or 12 hours or that previous milk feeding before to let that amount kind of take its full effect. And then they show that, it does provide long-lasting analgesia, and so long-lasting pain relief. And really, we usually, even though it does look like it lasts for almost 100 hours, really we say that it lasts about a day. So 24 hours, you're going to have some good, some decent pain relief. The cost of meloxicam, depending on where you get it from, is about 75 cents per calf. Our bottle costs that we get 100 tablets in costs about $24, I think. It's a human medication, and so you do have to get your veterinarian to give that to you. And we use about, you try and go by weight, but we use about 3 tablets per calf. And if the bigger they are, the more weight they have. So ideally you would weight tape them. And what I didn't point out about the lidocaine block is it was also about 75 cents per calf to use. So you're looking at about $1.50 in pain relief, but we do know that that's going to really help that calf not have any negative effects from being disbudded. So the last question then, or the last concern then, is how do we not cross-contaminate our calves? So with pasting, we're pasting very young calves, right? 1 to 3 days old, ideally, or less than a week. And how do we, if the lidocaine needs some time to work, how do you do that? And so ideally, what you're going to do, volume on that. Ideally, what you're going to do is you would go through about half an hour before your milk feeding, for example, and give a lidocaine block to however many calves you're going to paste. And then if you look at this calf, and she was a little squirrely to begin with, but if you look at this calf, then after the lidocaine block, you come through, 15 minutes or so, you feed her milk. This calf was shaved at this point, but you could shave her when you're giving the lidocaine block since you're already in there, and you paste her while she's drinking her milk. So it can really, it can reduce cross-contamination in that way. So again, if we look at how can we make disbudding easier, we know we want to develop some standard operating procedures so that everybody is on the same page, and what happens when that calf isn't successfully disbudded. And so again, that makes the owner happy because there's no horns and there's no hassle. People aren't asking him or her questions. From the calf perspective, that calf is only handled once. It doesn't have to go through being uncomfortable a few times. And the worker perspective, it's, you know, they know what to do, right? And they can be consistent. With the lidocaine block, with providing pain relief, again, we get no horns because especially with paste, they're going to rub it off if they feel that pain. And so it causes more problems. For the calf, it's painless, it works, and it's safe for the calf and the worker. And then the last one is having all the things that we need on hand. We train our people, we retrain them, and that again is going to be safe for the calf and the worker. And so, so hopefully this has given you some ideas. And I would like to, you know, to ask this last poll question about, you know, just listening to, or maybe seeing me do a lidocaine block, or, you know, kind of listening to some of the research on this, if you would consider maybe updating some methods or revisiting with your veterinarian about potentially doing a lidocaine block or giving Meloxicam 12 hours before you do the method of disbudding that you do. Or maybe your methods are the way they are. Maybe, you know, maybe you're doing all these things now and you don't have to update anything, or maybe you're just not going to do it, right? You got enough on your mind. It's crazy out there. You're struggling for workers, you know, all these things, or, you know, you're going to think about it, but maybe not right now. So, just out of, you know, curiosity, and I don't know if I can share this poll or not, but basically, it looks like, you know, it looks like most people are thinking that they might want to update their methods. About 50%, 25% are saying that their methods align with what we just talked about. And then another 25% are saying, yeah, I'm going to think about it, but I got enough on my plate right now. So, okay. Well, thank you guys. Oh, I guess I am sharing. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk
Yep,
about.
I can take over. Thank you, Dr.
Okay.
Kehoe. Yes, yes. So just a reminder, as we're kind of getting questions trickling in, we do have the Wisconsin Dairy and Beef Well-Being Conference that is going to cover many different well-being related topics. It's going to cover National Dairy Farm 4.0, fitness for transport, additional information on disbudding and pain mitigation, some information about heat stress, managing maternity cows, and genetic selection. So feel free to take a peek at that. We'd love to see you all there. We also have an evaluation of today's speakers, and I don't think I've seen any questions in the chat yet, but I'm going to go ahead and launch this evaluation as that gives people a little bit more time to think if they've got some questions for our speakers. And then also, if we can do one more slide, we also do want to remind you that we do have the Badger Dairy Insight series. It is every other Tuesday. Our next one is going to be January 25th. We're going to be talking about diving into dairy data projects with Dr. Victor Cabrera. After that, we're going to be heading to the February 8th, and that one will be on silage quality. And then March 1st will be ins and outs of cocktail forage mixes for dairy rations. So you can get registered for those programs at our Farm Ready Research website that is shown on the bottom of this graphic, and also has been dropped into our chat. And Heather, have you seen any questions come in for our speakers?
I have not yet.
Okay. All right, well, we'll give everybody just a minute or two to see if they've got any questions that come in. Oh, there we go. We've got one that came in. Does the acidity of the paste alter the effectiveness of the nerve block?
Good question. From what we've found, no. You know, the other question I get asked too is there anything that we can put on the horn bud, like some kind of a lidocaine paste or something, and that actually will affect the acidity of the caustic paste. So that's kind of why we have to go with something that's injectable at this point, because there's nothing out there that we can just put on the horn bud. But thankfully, the lidocaine block does nothing to the caustic paste, and it's probably even more effective because the calves aren't trying to rub it off. So thank you for the question.
Yes, thank you. I don't see any more questions, so I think, unless we get another one that comes in last minute here, I think we can go ahead and end our recording, and thank you to Dr. Kehoe for being with us today. We really appreciate your time.